I once had $42,000 in debt that kept me up at night. My hands would shake when checking my bank account, and tears would come whenever bills arrived. Today, I'm completely debt-free, with a 6-month emergency fund and investments growing on autopilot. Like emerging from a financial storm into clear skies, these 5 unexpected money moves transformed my reality. If you're drowning in debt right now, this is the video I wish someone had made for me when I couldn't see a way forward. The strategies I'm about to share might surprise you, but they work. The 42K wake-up call, my rock-bottom money moment. I still remember the exact moment it all came crashing down. There I was, sitting at my kitchen table at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, staring at my credit card statement. My hands were literally shaking. The numbers on the page seemed to blur and dance, but that total amount, $42,000, stood out in crystal-clear horror. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. The worst part? This wasn't even news. I'd been carrying this debt for years, watching it grow like some financial monster under my bed. I just refused to look directly at it. Instead, I'd peek at the minimum payments, throw whatever I could at them, and pretend everything was fine. Spoiler alert, everything was not fine. Let me back up and tell you about the day I hit rock bottom. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, and I was grabbing some groceries after work. I'd calculated everything down to the penny because that's what you do when you're secretly drowning in debt but maintaining appearances. But when I swiped my card at checkout, those 4 dreaded words appeared. Your card has been declined. The cashier gave me that look. You know the one. Part pity, part judgment. I fumbled through my wallet for another card, but deep down, I knew they were all maxed out. Eventually, I had to leave the groceries behind and walk out empty-handed, feeling everyone's eyes on my back. I made it to my car before completely falling apart. Sitting there with rain beating down on the roof, I cried ugly tears for a full hour. That's when I realized I couldn't keep playing this game of financial hide-and-seek anymore. The shame was paralyzing. It made me lie to friends about why I couldn't go out for dinner. It created elaborate excuses for why I still drove a car that broke down every other month. It had me checking my bank account through my fingers like I was watching a horror movie. My financial anxiety had completely taken over my life. I couldn't sleep, constantly running calculations in my head at 3 a.m. I started having actual panic attacks whenever my phone rang, convinced it was another collection agency. The debt wasn't just a number. It was a prison I had built around my entire existence. My turning point came on an ordinary Sunday, April 14th. I was scrolling through social media, seeing friends posting about their amazing vacations and new homes, when something in me just broke, like a fever breaking. Sitting on my worn-out couch, I whispered to myself, I can't live like this anymore. That simple sentence became my catalyst, not because it was profound, but because for once, I actually meant it. The next day, I took my first real step. I called in sick to work, former boss, and set up what I now call my financial crime scene on my living room floor. I forced myself to print out every statement from every account, credit cards, student loans, medical bills, even those random store credit cards I'd signed up for to get discounts on purchases I couldn't afford. Printing those statements was excruciating. Each page felt like a personal indictment. I kept thinking about all the things I could have done differently, the vacations I didn't need, the clothes still sitting in my closet with tags on, the rounds of drinks I bought trying to impress people. With everything spread out, I tallied it all up on a giant whiteboard. Credit card debt, $27,450 across 6 cards. Student loans, $12,680. Medical bills, $1,870. Plus smaller debts that created the grand total of $42,000. Seeing that number written in my own handwriting was different than seeing it on a statement. I couldn't pretend it was a mistake. This was real, and it was all mine. What happened next wasn't what most financial gurus would recommend. I didn't immediately create a strict budget or cut up my credit cards. Instead, I grabbed a blank notebook and just started writing about how I felt. All the fear, shame, and anxiety that had been building up for years came pouring out. That's when I realized something important. My debt was an emotional problem as much as a financial one. The numbers were just symptoms of deeper patterns. I needed more than just a payment plan. I needed to understand why I'd gotten here in the first place. So I created my financial reality check worksheet. Simple questions I forced myself to answer honestly. What am I afraid of? What's the worst that could happen? What patterns keep showing up in my spending? What am I really trying to buy when I swipe that card? Answering these questions was like turning on a light in a dark room I'd been stumbling around in for years. I realized I was using money to fill emotional gaps in my life, shopping when I felt lonely, picking up tabs to make people like me, buying expensive clothes to feel worthy at a job where I felt invisible. The financial reality check didn't fix my debt, but it changed how I felt about it. Instead of a shameful secret, it became a problem I could solve. That shift, from overwhelming shame to cautious hope, was the real game changer. Having that moment of clarity didn't magically make $42,000 disappear or instantly fix habits I'd spent years building. What it did give me was the courage to try something different, to stop hiding and start healing. I was about to discover that the path out of financial rock would require strategies addressing both the dollars and cents reality and the emotional patterns that had gotten me there in the first place. Act 1, Debt Demolition. The unexpected strategy that actually worked. After my financial reality check, I did what any desperate person would do. I Googled how to pay off debt fast and followed the advice to the letter. But 3 months later, I was more stressed than ever, even though I was doing everything right. What nobody tells you about debt payoff is that your brain has way more influence over your success than your calculator does. Every finance guru out there has their pet method for tackling debt. You've probably heard of the debt snowball, paying off smallest balances first, or the debt avalanche, tackling highest interest rates first. I dutifully made my spreadsheet, ordered my debts by interest rate like a good financially responsible adult, and prepared to climb my way out of the hole, one logical payment at a time. Let me tell you how that went. Terribly. Like, spectacularly bad. I followed the debt avalanche method religiously for almost 3 months. My highest interest credit card was sitting at a painful 24.99% APR with an $8,200 balance. Mathematically, focusing all my extra money on that card while making minimum payments on everything else made perfect sense. But emotionally, I was drowning. Every time I'd make an extra $300 payment, it felt like throwing a cup of water on a house fire. The balance barely moved, and I still had 5 other credit card statements showing up in my mailbox every month. Each envelope was a paper reminder of my failure. I'd make progress on that big high-interest card, then get so discouraged I'd stress buy takeout or grab drinks with friends. And just like that, I'd undo all my progress. 3 months in, I'd only paid down about $650 on that main card, and I was ready to give up completely. The math was right, but the method was totally wrong for my brain. That's when I had my light bulb moment while scrolling through Reddit at 2 a.m., as one does during financial crises. Someone mentioned ranking their debts by sleep factor, basically how much each debt kept them up at night. This approach acknowledged what traditional methods ignored: debt is as emotional as it is mathematical. So I created my debt freedom tracker. Instead of just listing amounts and interest rates, I added columns for anxiety level, 1 to 10, and victory impact. How amazing would it feel to eliminate this particular debt? When I rearranged my debts using these emotional factors, everything changed. My third smallest credit card, one with a $2,340 balance, shot to the top of my priority list. It wasn't my highest interest rate, 19.8%, but it was tied to a store I'd worked at in college and carried emotional baggage. Every time I got that statement, I remembered the dumb purchases I'd made with my employee discount, trying to look successful when I was anything but. I decided to try something completely different. I'd focus all my financial firepower on that emotionally draining card while making minimum payments on everything else. The exact opposite of what financial experts advised. Within 6 weeks, I'd completely paid off that card. The emotional high from cutting it up and closing that account gave me more motivation than any financial advice ever had. It felt like closing a chapter of my life that I'd been ready to leave behind. That's when I developed my emotional avalanche method. a debt strategy that worked with my psychology, not against it. I built a scoring system that combined practical factors, interest rates, balances, with emotional ones, anxiety level, victory impact, and a liberation score for how free I'd feel without that particular debt. My tracker gave each debt a combined score from 1 to 100. For example, store credit card. Balance 2,340ers, interest 19.8%, anxiety level 9, victory impact 8, combined score 92, high priority. Compare that to major credit card, balance 8s and $200, 24.99%, anxiety level 6, victory impact 5, combined score 76, medium priority. The difference was night and day. In the 3 months using the traditional approach, I'd paid off about $650 total. In the next 3 months, using my emotional avalanche, I completely eliminated 3 separate debts totaling over $5,400. What blew my mind was discovering that my approach wasn't just emotionally satisfying, it was actually more effective financially too. Because I wasn't getting discouraged and stress shopping, I was consistently putting more money toward debt each month. The motivation from regular wins gave me energy to pick up extra shifts and cut unnecessary spending. I also added a debt-free date column for each account. Instead of facing down years of debt, I was 73 days away from eliminating my next credit card. Suddenly, my timeline felt manageable. The visual difference in my tracker told the whole story. Before, my spreadsheet looked like a financial prison, sterile rows of numbers that made me feel trapped. After, it resembled more of a video game dashboard, colorful, personalized, and designed to trigger little dopamine hits with every bit of progress. I added conditional formatting so cells would change from red to yellow to green as balances decreased. I created a graph showing my freedom percentage increasing over time. The system really proved itself with my medical bill. Even though it was a mid-sized debt with 0 interest, it had the highest anxiety score of all my debts. Every time I made a payment, I relived that whole medical emergency. Once I recognized that emotional drain, I diverted extra cash to eliminate it ahead of schedule. My financial progress accelerated after that because I reclaimed all the mental energy I'd been spending on worry. My approach worked because it leveraged psychological principles. Each debt I eliminated created a success spiral. The positive feeling from one victory gave me momentum to tackle the next debt. By addressing the emotional weight of each debt, I removed the psychological barriers that had been holding me back. Act 2. Investment acceleration. Finding money when there was none. The investment revelation didn't just help me crush my debt, it completely rewired how I thought about money's potential. I used to think investing was this exclusive VIP club where I'd get laughed away at the door. Watching friends casually mention their investment returns while I was drowning in debt felt like they were speaking a foreign language. Investing is for people who have their financial act together, I told myself. Not for disaster cases like me. It was my go-to excuse whenever the topic came up. And honestly, that mindset was costing me way more than I realized. I'd always bought into that super common money myth. You need to be 100% debt-free before you even think about investing. It made sense on the surface. Why put money into stocks when you're paying 20% interest on credit cards, right? Financial gurus reinforce this all the time with their "debt is an emergency" mantra. And I totally believed them. After all, I was the poster child for financial chaos, so who was I to question conventional wisdom? But then came my holy cow moment. I stumbled across a compound interest calculator one night, probably avoiding my budget spreadsheet, let's be real, and plugged in some numbers. If I waited 5 more years to start investing while focusing only on debt, I'd potentially miss out on over $43,000 in future growth. Just by waiting. The math was brutal. For every year I delayed investing, I was essentially throwing away thousands in potential future money. What's scarier than investing while still in debt? Realizing what it costs not to. So I decided to try something that felt totally wrong at first. I opened up my budget and created what I called a money map. Basically, a full audit of where every single dollar was going. I tracked absolutely everything for 30 days. Like those daily $4.75 coffees that added up to a shocking $142.50 monthly, or those small lunch orders that became a $260 monthly restaurant habit. The results were embarrassing, to say the least. My money map revealed 3 major expenses silently draining my accounts. First, my convenience tax. I was spending an extra $210 monthly on delivery fees, ride shares, and premiums for not planning ahead. Second, my subscription graveyard. I was paying $134 monthly for 11 different subscriptions, including 3 streaming services I barely used, a meditation app I'd opened twice, and a clothing box service sending me stuff I rarely wore. Third, my emotional spending. Those random Target and Amazon purchases that magically happened after bad days at work, adding up to around $180 per month on stuff I couldn't even remember buying. Just like that, I'd found over $500 monthly that could work harder for me. But getting over my fear of investing was the real challenge. The voice in my head kept saying, "What if I lose it all? What if I pick the wrong things?" That's when I created my training wheels investing plan. Like learning to ride a bike, I needed to start small before hitting the financial highway. I began with micro investments, just $1 a day, using an app that rounded up my purchases. Psychologically, it was huge. I could handle losing $30 if everything went sideways, but not thousands. After a month, I made $1.87 in returns. Less than $2 sounds laughable, but that tiny amount changed everything. It was the first time money had worked for me instead of the other way around. So I took the next step and set up an automatic transfer of $25 weekly into a simple, low-cost index fund. No stock picking, no complicated strategies, just a basic S&P 500 index fund with minimal fees. That first month felt scarier than skydiving. But as those transfers continued and I adjusted to living without that $100 monthly, something shifted. I started checking my tiny investment account more than my social media. I'd get these little dopamine hits seeing it grow. Even on days when it went down a bit, I was learning this was normal. 3 months into my training wheels plan, I'd saved enough to make my first significant investment, $500 into a Roth IRA. I chose a target date retirement fund that would automatically adjust its risk level as I got closer to retirement age. That first $500 investment transformed how I saw myself. I wasn't just Valerie the financial disaster anymore. I was Valerie who invests for her future too. It gave me this sense of agency I'd never experienced with money before. The most surprising benefit was psychological. Every purchase became a question of, do I want this thing now, or do I want the future growth this money could create? That impulse buy wasn't just $70 anymore, it was potentially $280 in my retirement account decades later. I discovered that investing small amounts regularly was way less stressful than trying to save huge lump sums. $25 a week felt doable, and those small consistent actions compounded in ways I never expected. Within 6 months, I had increased my contributions to $50 weekly. It meant trade-offs, but those sacrifices didn't feel like deprivation anymore. They felt like active choices for my future self. The real breakthrough came when I realized I could pursue both goals simultaneously, paying down debt and building wealth. I developed my 75-25 split, putting 75% of my extra money toward debt and 25% toward investments. Within a year, my portfolio had grown to just over $3,000. Not life-changing money, but the psychological impact was enormous. I had proof that my financial story wasn't just about digging out of a hole. It was also about building something new. The unexpected money move, balancing debt payoff with building wealth. That $3,000 portfolio might sound small, but it sparked the money strategy that would scandalize most financial gurus. What if the pay all debt first rule that everyone preaches is actually costing you thousands in future wealth? The math behind my rebellious approach shocked even me. When I mentioned to my financial advisor that I was investing while still paying off debt, he literally put down his coffee mug and stared at me like I'd just suggested skydiving without a parachute. "Valerie," he said with that concerned parent tone, "you need to focus on eliminating high-interest debt before putting a single penny into investments." His reaction wasn't surprising. This advice is practically tattooed on the forehead of every financial expert out there. Pay off all your debt before investing. It's considered financial gospel. And honestly, it sounds completely logical on the surface. Why would you invest money to earn 7 to 10% in the market when your credit cards are charging 20% interest? But something about this one-size-fits-all approach didn't sit right with me. I'd been laser-focused on debt payoff for months, and while watching those balances drop felt amazing, another feeling was creeping in, a nagging worry that I was missing out on something bigger. So I did what any slightly nerdy, spreadsheet-obsessed person would do. I ran the numbers. And what I discovered literally made me sit up straight in my chair at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. If I waited until I was completely debt-free to start investing, which would take roughly 3.5 more years at my current pace, I'd miss out on approximately 3.5 years of compound growth. When I projected those numbers forward to retirement age, the difference was staggering. Taking that $200 I was already setting aside monthly and investing it from age 31 instead of waiting until 34 to 35 would mean an additional $62,000 in my retirement account by age 65, assuming a 7% average annual return. $62,000. That's actual life-changing money, all because of a 3.5-year head start. The revelation hit me hard. Waiting to invest until you're completely debt-free can actually make you poorer in the long run. So I developed my 75-25 split strategy. Instead of throwing 100% of my extra money at debt, I allocated 75% toward debt payoff and 25% toward investments. It's like tending two gardens simultaneously, one where you're pulling weeds, debt, and another where you're planting seeds, investments. Both require attention to flourish. The first month I implemented this strategy, I felt like I was getting away with something forbidden. I kept thinking, am I making a huge mistake? But as I watched both numbers move in the right directions, debt going down, investments creeping up, my financial motivation skyrocketed. To track this dual approach, I created my financial freedom dashboard, a single-page spreadsheet showing both journeys side by side. On the left, my debt freedom tracker started at $42,000 with a goal of $0. On the right, my wealth building tracker began at $0 with an initial goal of $10,000. Imagine two thermometers, one dropping as debt decreased, the other rising as investments grew, giving me that immediate visual satisfaction every time I logged in. This balanced approach transformed my money mindset completely. During market dips when my investments temporarily lost value, I could still celebrate debt reduction. And when unexpected expenses slowed my debt payoff, seeing my investments grow provided much-needed encouragement to keep going. The dual focus also protected me from debt fatigue syndrome. That exhausting feeling that no matter how much you pay off, you're still restricted, still not making progress. The investment side gave me something positive to focus on, something growing rather than just shrinking. Instead of feeling like I was digging out of a hole, I was simultaneously building a ladder to climb higher. This mental shift from survival mode to future building made all the difference in maintaining momentum. Here's what really surprised me. This strategy actually accelerated my debt payoff timeline. Seeing progress on both fronts created a financial motivation feedback loop that inspired me to find even more ways to increase my income and cut expenses. I became so excited about watching both numbers move that I started looking for ways to add extra money each month. I took on small freelance jobs, sold items I didn't need, and scrutinized my budget for additional savings. Within 6 months, I was actually putting more total money toward debt than when I was focusing on debt alone, all because my motivation remained consistently high. The most powerful aspect was the complete shift in my money identity. I was no longer just a debtor trying to fix past mistakes. I was also an investor building future wealth. That identity shift affected every financial decision. My mental calculations changed from "can I afford this?" to "is this worth delaying both my debt freedom date and my investment goals?" This dual accountability made impulse purchases much less appealing. The most eye-opening moment came about 8 months in. I was updating my dashboard when I noticed something remarkable. The monthly growth of my investment account had started to outpace my minimum debt payments. While still aggressively paying down debt, seeing my wealth grow faster than my debt obligations felt like crossing an invisible financial threshold. This approach works best with moderate interest debt, around 8–12%, and a solid emergency fund in place. With ultra-high interest debt above 15 to 20%, focusing primarily on debt reduction first typically makes more sense. But for me, the 75–25 split was the surprise money move that had the biggest impact, both financially and emotionally. Act 3. Income optimization. Earning more when asking feels impossible. What if I told you the conversation I was most terrified to have ended up accelerating my financial journey more than any budget spreadsheet ever could? While my balanced approach to investing and paying down debt was working, I had this sobering realization one night while staring at my financial projections. Even with perfect budgeting and my 75–25 strategy, I'd be paying off debt until basically middle age. The math was brutal. At my current income, complete debt freedom was still 15+ years away. I could practically hear my future self screaming at me from 2038. Let's talk about the money move that scared me more than checking my credit card statements. Asking for more money at work. The thought of walking into my boss's office with a specific number in mind made my hands physically shake. I'd genuinely rather have gotten a root canal. I remember calculating my $42,000 debt payoff timeline for the 100th time, trying different monthly payments and hitting the same depressing wall. The truth was painful but obvious. I needed to make more money, period. Asking for a raise is terrifying when you've spent years feeling financially inadequate. My brain created this wild scenario where my boss would not only reject me, but somehow discover all my financial struggles and realize I was a complete fraud who shouldn't even have my job. Classic catastrophic thinking. I needed preparation before I could approach that office with confidence. I created my value documentation system, a Google Doc where I tracked every contribution I made at work. For 3 months, I documented completed projects, positive client comments, colleague assistance, and additional responsibilities. I noted specific outcomes, my revamped email campaign increasing click-through rates by 28%, or how my new client onboarding process reduced support tickets by 1/3. This documentation wasn't just for my boss, it was for me. Each addition chipped away at the voice saying I wasn't worth more. After 3 months, I had 4 pages proving I was actually crushing it at my job, despite my financial self-doubt. Next came determining my ask. After researching salary comparison sites, talking with industry contacts, and gathering market data, I discovered I was underpaid by 15 to 20%. I decided on a 15% increase, which would boost my monthly income by $750 after taxes and cut my debt timeline from 15+ years to under 8. That transformation alone gave me courage. I prepared meticulously, writing a script highlighting my achievements, market rate research, and company commitment. To practice, I used an exposure hierarchy technique my therapist friend suggested, starting with a supportive friend who gave nothing but encouragement, then moving to a tougher critic who asked challenging questions, and finally recording myself on Zoom and forcing myself to watch it back. Absolutely excruciating, by the way. The night before the meeting, my thoughts raced. What if she laughs? What if this ruins our good relationship? What if I stutter through my points and look desperate? To calm my nerves, I wrote a letter to my debt, explaining I was taking this scary step to end our relationship sooner. Whatever happened, I was proud for trying. That letter helped me sleep. The actual conversation was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd scheduled it for Thursday morning, certain my boss would need time to think about it, code for time to figure out how to let me down gently. I arrived with trembling hands and an over-prepared folder of documentation. Before we start, my boss said, as I sat down, I want to mention we've been extremely impressed with your work these past few months. You've really stepped up. I was caught off guard but pushed through my prepared points while trying to seem casual about the notebook I was white-knuckling. When I stated my request for a 15% raise to align with market rates, there was a terrifying 3 seconds of silence. She couldn't approve 15% immediately, but committed to 10% right away, with the remaining 5% potentially coming at my next review, just 3 months away. That 10% meant an extra $500 monthly, cutting my debt timeline by nearly 5 years. As I was leaving, she added, not many people document their contributions like you presented today. Would you be interested in leading a professional development session on self-advocacy for junior team members? That conversation didn't just increase my income, it positioned me as a leader and opened doors I hadn't considered. Within 6 months, that opportunity led to a promotion with another 8% raise, bringing my total increase to 18%, more than my original ask. The most surprising outcome wasn't the money. It was discovering my boss respected me for advocating for myself. I'd feared asking for more would make me seem greedy or entitled, when it actually demonstrated I valued my contributions and understood my worth to the company. That 20-minute meeting I dreaded for months completely changed my financial trajectory. My monthly debt payments jumped from $850 to $1,300, and my investments increased from $200 to $300. But beyond the numbers, I learned something even more valuable, that acknowledging your worth professionally can transform both your financial future and how others see you. The confidence I gained from that conversation became as valuable as the raise itself. Side hustle success, the low-effort income stream that changed everything. That first raise conversation changed my financial game, but I was still hungry for more. With the extra breathing room in my budget, I started looking into the side hustle world. You've seen them all over YouTube. Make $5,000 this weekend with these 5 easy side hustles. But my journey into supplemental income wasn't nearly as glamorous as those clickbait thumbnails promised. Let me take you through my embarrassing side hustle phase. First, I tried selling stuff I didn't need from my apartment. After weekend meetups with strangers in coffee shop parking lots, I made some quick cash, but that dried up once I ran out of items to sell. Then came the survey apps promising big money from my couch. After weeks of mindless clicking, I earned pocket change at a rate that wouldn't even buy me a decent coffee per hour. Food delivery and rideshare seemed promising with their flexibility. But after factoring in gas, vehicle wear, and waiting time between orders, I was making significantly less than my regular job. The most frustrating part, I was working harder than ever but seeing minimal financial progress. I was exhausted, irritable, and the extra $200 to $300 a month barely justified the 20-plus hours I was sacrificing. One night, after a particularly disappointing delivery shift, I sat in my car feeling completely defeated. I'd spent 4 hours rushing around town for what amounted to less than minimum wage. Something had to change. I realized I was approaching side hustles all wrong, trading more of my limited time for minimal money. The question wasn't what side hustle pays the most, but what skills do I already have that people would pay a premium for? This led me to create the skills inventory exercise. I grabbed a notebook and drew 3 columns: things I'm good at, things I enjoy doing, and things people pay for. When I looked at where these columns overlapped, I had a light bulb moment. In my day job as an administrative assistant, I was constantly reorganizing messy spreadsheets and creating tracking systems everyone loved. This intersection of organizational skills, attention to detail, and database management was actually a highly marketable skill set. To find clients without spending on fancy websites, I posted in Facebook groups for small business owners, offering a free 30-minute spreadsheet makeover to the first 5 people who responded. The post resulted in 12 messages within hours. Those 5 free sessions led to 3 paying clients who then referred me to others. Within a month, I had a waiting list without spending anything on advertising. The game changer came when I packaged my services to maximize value while minimizing time investment. Instead of charging hourly, I created 3 simple packages. 1. The Spreadsheet Rescue, $75 for cleaning up an existing spreadsheet and making it user-friendly. 2. The Custom Tracker, $150 for building a custom tracking system from scratch with automated calculations. 3. The Dashboard Creator, $250 for a comprehensive dashboard with visualized data. This transformed my side income completely. I could now complete a $150 project in about 90 minutes once I had my templates set up, nearly 4 times what my day job paid. I structured my workflow for efficiency, working on client projects only on Tuesday and Thursday evenings and batching similar tasks. I created templates I could quickly customize and set up an autoresponder that managed client expectations about my limited availability, which actually made my services seem more valuable. The satisfaction I felt was worlds apart from my earlier side hustle frustration. Before, I'd come home drained and discouraged, wondering if the extra dollars were worth the exhaustion. Now, I finished client projects feeling energized, appreciated for my expertise, and honestly a bit surprised that people paid so well for something that came naturally to me. Within 4 months, my spreadsheet business was consistently bringing in $1,200 plus monthly with just 12 to 15 hours of work. The income went straight toward accelerating my debt payoff and investment goals. But beyond the money, what truly changed everything was discovering I could create systems once and benefit repeatedly. Each new client became easier, as my process became more streamlined. The contrast with my previous attempts was stark. Food delivery had me constantly trading hours for dollars with no scaling potential. My spreadsheet business became more efficient and profitable over time as I refined my offerings and raised my rates. Here's what made this side hustle successful. I stopped chasing what everyone else was doing and identified the unique intersection of my skills, market demand, and time efficiency. I wasn't competing with thousands of other gig workers. I was solving specific problems for a defined audience willing to pay premium rates. If you're looking for your own profitable side hustle, find that sweet spot where these questions overlap. 1. What skills do you already have that you might be taking for granted? 2. Which of those skills solve a specific problem for a specific group? 3. Can you package that solution in a way that doesn't directly trade your time for money? The most lucrative side hustle isn't usually the trending one on social media. It's the one leveraging your unique abilities to deliver clear value. Often, your most marketable asset is something you do effortlessly that others find challenging. This additional income stream transformed my financial journey. I was now putting an extra $850 monthly toward debt while still increasing my investments. My debt payoff timeline shortened dramatically, and watching my accounts grow created incredible financial momentum. Act 4, Risk Management, the emergency fund formula that prevented backsliding. Just when my financial momentum felt unstoppable, life threw me the classic plot twist. A car that decided to break down in spectacular fashion. Ever notice how emergencies always seem to wait until you're making progress before they pop up to test your resolve? It was a random Tuesday morning when my trusty Honda made a mechanical death rattle. 1 minute I was jamming to my playlist, and the next, smoke was pouring from under the hood. As I sat on the side of the road waiting for a tow truck, I realized my day was about to get much worse. The mechanic's verdict came with a $2,300 price tag, a transmission issue that couldn't be ignored. All the financial confidence I'd built came crashing down. Despite my progress with debt payoff and investing, I had completely overlooked one crucial piece of my financial puzzle: an actual emergency fund. I had about $600 set aside in what I called my just-in-case fund. Facing a $2,300 repair bill made that amount seem almost laughably inadequate. As I stared at the repair estimate, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the same anxiety I thought I'd left behind when I started tackling my debt. I seriously considered putting the repair on my credit card, the one I'd worked so hard to pay down. After months of disciplined debt reduction, I was one car problem away from sliding right back to where I started. What good was all this financial progress if one emergency could undo everything? I took a deep breath and called my friend Maya, who worked in financial planning. "What's your emergency fund formula?" she asked. I had to admit I didn't have one. I'd arbitrarily decided that $600 seemed decent. Maya laughed and said, "That's like deciding how much water to bring on a hike without knowing how long the trail is or what the weather will be." After borrowing money from my parents, hello, humbling experience, to cover part of the repair, I created my reality-based emergency fund calculator. Rather than following the vague 3 to 6 months of expenses advice that always seemed impossible to reach, I took a concrete approach. First, I listed every possible emergency I could reasonably expect. Car repairs, $1,200 to $3,000. medical expenses not covered by insurance, $1,500 for a root canal, emergency travel, $800 plus lost wages, pet emergencies for my aging cat Jasper, potential job loss, and apartment issues like sudden moves, $5,000 for deposits and moving costs. This reality check transformed my approach to emergency savings. Instead of one overwhelming goal, I created tiered protection levels with specific numbers. Level 1, $2,500 for handling common emergencies without debt. Level 2, $5,000 for larger single emergencies or multiple smaller ones. And Level 3, $10,000 for job loss combined with another emergency. The breakthrough was my Peace of Mind premium system. I assigned each potential emergency a stress score from 1 to 10. Car issues scored a 9 because transportation affects my ability to work. Medical emergencies were an 8 due to my health anxiety. Job loss was a 10. Nothing stressed me more than income insecurity. This vulnerability assessment became the foundation of my financial strategy. I prioritized building mini funds for my highest stress categories first. This personalized approach meant I was strategically reducing my specific anxieties while building financial security. To make this sustainable, I created my emergency fund autopilot system. I opened a separate high-yield savings account with no debit card access and set up automatic transfers of $25 every Monday and Thursday, small enough to be painless but consistent enough to grow steadily. I also implemented my surprise money rule. 50% of any unexpected money, tax returns, rebates, bonuses, gifts, went straight to the emergency fund before I could spend it. This accelerated my progress without feeling like a sacrifice. Within 4 months, I reached my level 1 goal of $2,500. The peace of mind was immediate and tangible. I actually slept better. The constant low-grade anxiety about what if something goes wrong diminished because I now had an answer. I'd handle it with my emergency fund. The real test came 3 months later, when my apartment's refrigerator died completely, taking all my food with it. My landlord was unreachable on vacation, and I needed a solution immediately. The old me would have panicked and charged a mini fridge to a credit card. Instead, I calmly withdrew $350 from my emergency fund, bought a used mini fridge on Facebook Marketplace, and later negotiated with my landlord to apply that amount toward my next rent payment. My emergency fund formula became my 313 formula: 3 tiers of protection, 1 automated system, and 3 priority categories based on my personal stress points. This approach made emergency saving achievable and immediately useful rather than a distant goal. My Level 1 fund could handle 80% of likely emergencies. Level 2 covered 95% of scenarios, and Level 3 would protect me during extended income disruption. The tiered approach meant I always had something working for me, even before reaching my ultimate goal. The most surprising benefit was the psychological transformation. With each deposit, my financial anxiety decreased. The fund became both my financial shock absorber and stress reducer. I no longer jumped when my phone rang or felt that pit in my stomach when an unexpected expense arose. 1 year after my car breakdown, my emergency fund had grown to $7,200, comfortably in my Level 2 protection range. I'd used it twice for legitimate emergencies and replenished it according to my system. More importantly, I'd broken the check-to-paycheck psychology that had kept me financially vulnerable for years. The setback strategy: handling financial emergencies without derailing progress. With my emergency fund finally built, I thought I was bulletproof against financial disasters. Until a pink slip on a random Tuesday morning proved just how wrong I was. That company-wide email with organizational restructuring in the subject line was the beginning of my 4-month unemployment nightmare. Nothing tests your financial resilience quite like watching your income suddenly drop to zero while your bills keep rolling in like nothing happened. That first week was pure panic mode. I remember staring at my budget spreadsheet, frantically calculating how long my emergency fund would last. The math was brutal. I had saved enough to cover about 2 months of expenses, but the average job search in my industry was taking 3 to 4 months. My stomach dropped when I realized I was facing a potential 2-month gap with no income and ongoing bills. All that progress I'd made The debt I'd paid down, the investments I'd started, suddenly felt like it was balancing on a knife's edge. The thought of maxing out credit cards again gave me actual nightmares. But instead of spiraling, I took a deep breath and created my financial triage system. Like a surgeon quickly assessing injuries in an emergency room, I needed to determine which financial obligations needed immediate attention and which could wait. I grabbed a notebook and divided my expenses into 3 categories. Critical expenses, the non-negotiables like rent, utilities, minimum debt payments, basic groceries, and health insurance. These keep the lights on and prevent credit damage. Important expenses, my phone bill, internet for job applications, and car-related costs for interviews. These supported my job search, though I could potentially negotiate terms. Optional expenses, everything else, streaming services, dining out, investment contributions, and extra debt payments. These were immediately suspended. I created a week-by-week cash flow projection for the next 4 months, which showed I'd hit 0 by week 9 if I maintained current expenses. That's when I implemented my expense elimination cascade, immediately cutting all optional expenses to free up about $450 monthly. Next, I contacted service providers to negotiate temporary reductions. My cell phone provider offered a 3-month discount, saving $25 monthly. My car insurance company suggested temporarily increasing my deductible, cutting my premium by $40 monthly. My internet provider had a financial hardship plan that reduced my bill by $20 monthly for 6 months. The most intimidating calls were to my creditors. I'd prepared specific scripts for each call. Hi, my name is Valerie Thompson. I've been a customer with you for X years and have maintained a good payment history. Unfortunately, I recently lost my job, and while I'm actively looking for new employment, I'm reaching out proactively to discuss temporary payment options. I'm committed to meeting my obligations, but I may need some flexibility in the short term. What programs do you offer for customers in my situation? The responses varied. Some creditors allowed me to skip a payment with no penalty. Others reduced my minimum payment by 50% for 3 months. One credit card company even offered a hardship program that temporarily lowered my interest rate from 19% to 7% for 6 months. I documented every conversation, representative's name, date, and agreement details, and requested email confirmation. This documentation proved crucial when one company later tried to renege on our agreement. These adjustments extended my way from 2 months to nearly 3.5, but I still faced a potential 2-week gap. That's when I implemented my income bridge strategy, leveraging my spreadsheet skills for rush projects with premium rates. I offered previous clients same-day service as a special limited-time offer, generating enough income to bridge the gap until full-time employment. I also developed a minimum viable payment approach to debt. Instead of abandoning my debt payoff plan entirely, I scaled it back to maintain good standing without damaging my credit. I created a spreadsheet showing exactly what would happen to each debt with minimum payments for 4 months, including extra interest costs and extended payoff timelines. This clarity was essential for my mental health. Seeing the actual impact, about $840 in extra interest and a 3-month extension to my debt payoff, helped me recognize this was a temporary setback, not a complete failure. I wasn't losing everything, just experiencing a detour on my financial journey. 4 months later, I landed a new job with a slightly higher salary than my previous position. The relief was enormous, but the experience transformed my view of financial security. I immediately, 1. Upgraded my financial triage system into a permanent setback recovery plan with clearly defined steps for the first signs of trouble. 2. Increased my emergency fund goal from 2 months to 6 months of expenses. 3. Created quarterly financial fire drills to practice my response to income loss. These fire drills maintain my financial readiness without experiencing actual emergencies. Each quarter, I ask myself, if I lost my job tomorrow, what exactly would I do first, second, third? Then I update my scripts, creditor contact information, and expense categories based on my current situation. The most valuable lesson wasn't just about having an emergency fund. It was about having a detailed, practiced plan for using that fund effectively during a crisis. Now, when the next emergency hits, and there's always a next one, I won't waste precious time figuring out what to do. I'll simply execute. Act 5. Future-proofing. The mindset shift from survival to growth. Little did I know that conquering my debt mountain would lead to an identity crisis I never saw coming. That first debt-free bank statement should have been my victory lap, but instead it left me feeling strangely hollow. The zeros where my balances used to be stared back at me like strangers. No champagne popping. No confetti. Just me, sitting at my kitchen table, wondering why this moment of triumph felt so empty. After years of sacrifice, budget spreadsheets, and saying I can't, I'm paying off debt, to virtually every invitation, I'd finally reached the promised land. But instead of feeling liberated, I felt weirdly lost. My debt had become such a central part of my identity that without it, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The truth was uncomfortable. I'd gotten really good at being Valerie who's fighting her way out of debt. I had routines, systems, and a clear mission. Every dollar had a job, mostly killing debt. Every small win had a measurable impact. Staring at my zero balance, the question hit me like a truck. Who am I without my financial battles? This identity vacuum sent me spiraling. I went on a mini spending spree. The moment that really shook me was nearly signing up for a luxury gym membership that would have eaten a huge chunk of my newly freed up cash flow. It was like my brain was rebelling against years of restriction. It was my friend Maya who called me out during coffee. So you spent years climbing out of a hole just to dig yourself a new one? Her words stung because they were true. I wasn't celebrating freedom. I was sabotaging it because I didn't know how to be financially successful. That conversation sparked my search for a post-debt identity. Like a snake shedding its old skin, I needed to emerge as someone new. Someone who understood what money meant beyond survival. What did I actually want from my financial life now? I created what I now call my financial values exercise. First, I wrote down every emotion I'd ever felt about money, both positive and negative. Shame, pride, stress, security, anxiety, hope, freedom, fear. There were 27 emotions on my list. Then I asked myself which feelings I wanted to keep and which ones I wanted to leave behind. The exercise revealed something surprising. While battling debt, my relationship with money had been primarily driven by fear and shame. Every decision was about avoiding pain rather than creating joy. Where I once saw money as a constant threat, I now needed to see it as something that could work for me, not against me. The breakthrough came when I identified my core financial values: freedom, security, generosity, and growth. These 4 words became my new financial North Stars. Instead of being motivated by running away from debt, I could now be pulled forward by moving toward these values. Freedom meant building enough flexibility into my finances to make choices based on what I truly wanted. Security meant protecting myself from future emergencies without living in constant fear. Generosity was about using money to strengthen relationships and support causes I cared about. And growth meant continuing to expand my financial capabilities. With these values as my foundation, I created my first true long-term financial plan. For freedom, I planned a solo trip to Portugal I dreamed about for years. For security, I expanded my emergency fund. For generosity, I set aside a giving budget. And for growth, I mapped out a plan to increase my investment contributions. The most challenging part was developing new mindset practices without fear as my motivator. When you're in debt, fear works pretty well. Fear of collection calls, fear of bankruptcy. But fear is exhausting as a long-term strategy. I started practicing future self-visualization. Each Sunday, I'd spend 5 minutes imagining my future self, thanking my current self for smart decisions. I'd visualize being able to help a friend in need because I had built financial strength, or sleeping peacefully through a recession because I had diversified investments. Another mindset shift was moving from scarcity to abundance. During my debt payoff, I constantly focused on what I couldn't have. Now, I practice gratitude for what my money could do. Instead of thinking, I can't afford that vacation, I started thinking, I'm choosing to invest in my retirement instead. I also confronted my financial imposter syndrome. There was this persistent voice saying, I didn't deserve financial success because of past mistakes. To counter this, I started keeping a financial wins journal, where I documented every smart money choice I made. Perhaps the most transformative shift was redefining my relationship with money itself. I stopped seeing money as a scarce resource and started viewing it as a tool that could create the life I wanted. Money wasn't the goal, it was the vehicle to reach my goals. This led to a profound realization. Financial health isn't about the numbers, it's about your relationship with those numbers. You can have $1 million and still feel anxious if your mindset is broken. Conversely, you can have modest savings but feel secure with healthy money beliefs. The breakthrough that finally cemented my new identity came when my cousin called asking for help with her debt. As I helped her, I realized I had become someone new. Not Valerie battling debt, but Valerie who understands how money works and can help others. Looking back, becoming debt-free wasn't the finish line. It was just the end of the first race in a much longer marathon. The real transformation wasn't paying off the last dollar. It was rebuilding my entire relationship with money from a foundation of values rather than fear. The real timeline: how long financial freedom actually takes. If social media financial gurus have taught us anything, it's that financial freedom apparently happens in 90-day miracle sprints with perfectly staged celebration photos. But let's be real about what my journey actually looked like. That financial marathon I mentioned? The real timeline was nothing like those neatly packaged success stories you scroll past while feeling increasingly inadequate about your own progress. Phase 1. The aggressive start, months 1 to 3. When I first totaled up my debt, I genuinely believed I'd be debt-free in 18 months. I'd read enough I paid off $50,000 in just 1 year articles to convince myself it was totally doable. I created elaborate spreadsheets projecting my debt-free date, complete with motivational quotes and virtual confetti. Month 1 was pure fire. I cut spending to the bone, started my first side hustle, and put an extra $300 toward my debt. I was unstoppable. But by month 3, reality started setting in. My motivation was waning. I was tired of saying no to everything, and that debt number was still massive. Phase 2. The reality check, months 4 to 9. Month 4 hit me like a wall. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my tracker thinking, this is impossible. At this rate, I'll be debt-free when I'm 65. I almost quit that night. The math was depressing. I'd paid off about $2,000 in 4 months, meaning I had roughly 5 more years to go. Not exactly Instagram-worthy progress. Months 5 through 9 were a blur of consistency without dramatic results. I was making the right moves, but my debt was still over $30,000. The progress was real but painfully slow. Phase 3. Finding my rhythm, months 10 to 18. The breakthrough came in month 10 when I negotiated my first salary increase. That extra $500 monthly changed my timeline calculations dramatically, and I started seeing real momentum. I created a visualization tool called my Freedom Timeline that projected forward, showing how each additional dollar shaved days off my freedom date. Watching that timeline slide from June 2026 to February 2026 to November 2025 gave me something to celebrate even when the total debt wasn't changing fast enough. The tool calculated the compound effect of my payments. That $20 I didn't spend on takeout, it saved me $32 in the long run by eliminating interest and moved my debt-free date 3 days closer. These micro victories kept me engaged when the big number wasn't moving quickly enough. Phase 4. Unexpected setbacks, the 2-year mark. My first year, I paid off about $7,500. My second year, despite a 4-month unemployment period, I managed $12,000. Financial timelines are rarely constant. I had 3 months where medical expenses prevented extra payments, 2 months where car troubles ate my side hustle income, and a holiday season where family obligations slowed my progress. During these plateaus, I focused on non-numerical victories, maintaining my systems, not adding new debt, and keeping my financial habits intact. Phase 5. Accelerated progress, the final year. By year 3, with increased income and my systems fully optimized, I was clearing almost $2,000 monthly toward debt. The emotional timeline moved in the opposite direction of the numerical one. The first few months felt agonizingly slow, while the last year flew by as I watched the numbers drop rapidly. It's like running a marathon where the first mile feels longer than the last 10 combined. Hitting the halfway point was a psychological game changer. When my debt dropped below $21,000, something clicked. I was closer to the finish line than the starting line. My tracker shifted from showing how much I'd paid to highlighting how little I had left, giving me a second wind during the middle stretch. I discovered the power of milestone celebrations. When I hit $10,000 paid, I took a day off work and hiked my favorite trail. At $20,000, I bought concert tickets to see an artist I loved. At $30,000, I spent a weekend at my friend's beach house. These weren't just rewards, they were reminders that I was building a life while paying off debt, not putting everything on hold until I was debt-free. From the day I stared at my first complete debt tally to my final payment took 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Nearly 4 years, not the 6 months some YouTube gurus promise, not the 1-year timeline I initially hoped for, but also not the 15+ years it would have taken without intervention. I'm actually glad it wasn't faster. Those 4 years transformed me completely. Around the 2-year mark, I realized that debt payoff timelines aren't just about math. They're about sustainability. I could have potentially finished 6 months sooner if I'd maintained my initial extreme budget, worked every weekend on side hustles, and never spent on anything enjoyable. But I would have been miserable, probably given up entirely, and certainly not developed a healthy long-term relationship with money. During the final year, my timeline actually accelerated beyond my projections. The habits and systems I built created their own momentum. My side hustle clients were referring new business without my active marketing. Financial progress typically follows a curve, starting slowly and gradually accelerating as your knowledge, habits, and resources compound. The final stretch moved nearly twice as fast as the beginning, even though I was putting in less conscious effort. Real, lasting financial transformation takes time. Mine took almost 4 years, and I'm proud of every month because each one taught me something valuable. Looking back on this journey, the biggest surprise wasn't in the numbers. It was discovering that financial transformation is actually an inside job. The mindset shifts were way more powerful than any spreadsheet I created. Your next move isn't just about tactics, but transformation. Whether it's conquering debt with emotional clarity, feeling the psychological shift from that first $25 investment, or building the confidence to ask for what you're worth, each step illuminates your path like a sunrise gradually revealing possibilities. Financial freedom isn't what I imagined. It's Tuesday mornings without holding my breath when checking accounts. It's helping family without hesitation. It's that quiet confidence knowing you can handle whatever comes next.